Hello, folks. Welcome back to WW2 TV and the last show of this week. Well, Niall's first Arnhem Myths show was a hit, so he is back for round 2, where he unpacks the truth regarding radios, General Sosabowski, Hicks and Hackett, 21st Independent Parachute Company, etc., etc. So I'll bring him in now. Good evening, Niall, my friend. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. So we were just discussing there, you take your groups, you've done three, was it 3 or 4 back-to-back market garden trips? Four.
1 D-Day, 3 market gardens in 4 weeks.
I mean, people are still, even after all the work that's coming out, people are still defaulting on A Bridge Too Far, the film. They're still defaulting on the kind of the basic Wikipedia stuff. And you think, there isn't really an excuse now, because there is a plethora of books. You're just going to go to that bookstore in Arnhem or in Arnhem itself and see all those books there, battalion by battalion, company by company. You've penned some of them. It baffles me why people are still repeating the old tropes. Why do you think they are?
Because I think this is John. I was talking to a guiding friend of mine 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he was in that very same bookshop. And Jonathan was looking at one of the €90 books, and the bloke who was with him said, "Not paying that sort of money, but where do you get your knowledge from?" And Jonathan looked at him and said, "I'm reading books like that."
Books like that, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think that's the problem is people. If you just go on a general Arnhem tour, and I've no problem with that at all, they don't want to buy one of these like Marshall Smart's books or some of the other ones, Camp Round Arnhem at 90, €100. They'll want to pay 10 quid for some pot boiler, should we call it, lobster hooking book or whatever, and they're entirely happy.
Yeah. Well, what we're going to do is bust a few myths and separate some reality. So over to you. So some Arnhem Myths, and we're going a little bit beyond Arnhem itself today, aren't we? We're touching on Americans, we're touching on the Poles, which is good because it's all the same battle. So let's move on. So radios. We're starting off with a doozy.
Well, I think this came up, didn't it, in part 1, because I didn't even mention the radios, and somebody said, well, the radios didn't work at Arnhem, and I'm thinking, yes, well, they did and they don't. So here's the classic scene of one of the officers from the Royal Signals. I'm not sure of his name, but obviously this is it's the still from Theirs Is the Glory, and I'm pleased. I hate this. I am not a radio expert, so I'm going to hopefully say that's either a 22 set in the background there, but it might be a 69. I don't know, or a 68. We really do. I'm going to apologise in advance. I say don't do this. I'm not really too much of a radio expert when it comes to all of the technical details of it, but the general rule of thumb is in every single film, for example, and certain books, the radios didn't work. Well, the answer to that is yes and no, as I said briefly when we were doing part 2. And I think the best one, nicked a few words from my old friend Tony Dean Drummond from the Middlebrook book, and he said, when details of the Arnhem were received, the goose egg was far too large, and that was no way that the infantry units could maintain contact with another. We reluctantly accepted the 68 sets because the division had laid down January 44 that the maximum diameter of the goose egg would be 3 miles, blah, 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 blah. We needed more 19 sets, more jeeps, more gliders, and it was all too late. We had to get on with what we had, but the fact that communications would be dodgy was something that the staff should have been aware of when the operation was being planned.
Yep, fair point.
So, Tony Dean Drummond. So there's a picture of the Jeep-mounted 22 set that I think Tony talked about in there. Relatively good radio, works pretty good in open country, but obviously in Arnhem, an Oosterbeek built-up area, sandy soil, lots of woods, blah, 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 blah. And, of course, you get the classic line of Roy Urquhart, Sean Connery comes in, doesn't he? Said, we haven't been able to make contact with anybody because the radios don't work. So let us go on. And then this is the one that I think a lot of people had the problem with as well. This is the 18 set that was used basically battalion and company level. That only had an effective range of a couple of miles, I think, from memory, and potentially wasn't great, again, in built-up areas. And then, of course,
there were problems with the 18 set in Normandy, and not even just range, just bits breaking and reception. It just didn't seem to be a very good design. But anyway, we're not going to go into too much into radios, but there's.
I mean, can I just go back
just
before we go into the Div Signals War Diary to sort of like that? I mean, obviously the classic line, isn't it? Of course, and all the radio sets have come with the wrong crystals.
Yeah.
Which is another classic line from A Bridge Too Far in certain books. Well, most of the British radios, to the best of my technical knowledge, use valves, and it was only the American sets mainly use crystals, and they only bought 2 sets. They were the ones for air grounds communication, for the cab rank, which of course never appeared, and the rest is history, isn't it? It's but the radios did work, as we will see on certain occasions.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an interesting one from the Div Signals War Diary, 17th of September. Communication by wireless established between 1st Airborne, 1st Parachute Brigade and the 82nd Airborne Division. And so that was 10 miles away. So then it starts to all sort of go to rat shit, doesn't it, really? As you can see, heavy interference, no dispatch rider, sending messages by dispatch rider, momentary wireless contact with Airborne Corps on base net at 9:45. Corps working the base 5-5. No other com to high communication. And then at midnight, they're obviously still trying through to the 1st Air Landing Brigade and 21st Independent Parachute Company. So there is some evidence that the radios didn't work, but obviously there is some evidence that they did work as well. Yeah.
Yeah, there's the next one.
Yes, might as well. So just jumping forward to the 21st, which is obviously 4 days later, they've now moved obviously to the Hartenstein. Base set experiencing jamming, not possible to pass traffic. Contact with ferry set lost. Div A-Way, 1st Air Landing Brigade, 4th Parachute Brigade, R33 on Div B-Wave. And then finally, of course, the one that really, really, in my opinion, helped the 1st Airborne Division and most of the veterans who were in use to beat pockets said when they got through on the 19 set, and I'm going to come on to the 9 Norman pattern a little bit later, 64th Medium Regiment, ranging commenced at once. And a little bit of a story about Norm Patton on the 21st, and we'll go into that on a couple of slides. Yeah. So again, this is my old friend Leo Hall from the, sadly no longer with us, used to be the president of the Central Lancs PRA. Might as well get that one in there, seeing as I'm the treasurer, and Dave McCauley, hopefully the secretary, is listening tonight. He was a signaller attached to the, or signaller with the Light Regiment. He got to the bridge with his sets or with his Jeep, and he managed to get contact between the bridge and the gun line to bring back support or bring down fire support. And I think if we go to the next slide, I had a chat with him one day, lived in Leyland, not so far from where I live. And he said, put my set under the skylight, pushed the aerial through the skylight, switched on, heard interference. 68 set up there. Aerial didn't quite reach reasons. Static interference didn't seem so bad on the 68. So I'd called up using the 22 set, and he came back on the 68 set, sending on the 22 set. So he did a workaround, and so there was obviously contact between the bridge and the gun line, and they obviously were able to bring down fire support when needed occasionally on the bridge to help them out. And as he said, potentially, hopefully, when the Dutch, German unsuppressed engines from the area did the trick as well, because I think that's one. I think this is going to be an interesting one for today's technology people, all the young people. You could remember, couldn't you, when you had the dreaded unsuppressed engines and you would get that on your TV and your radio. I'm not a technical expert on unsuppressed engines, but it's certainly done the trick.
Yeah.
Unless you want to add anything, Woody? No.
Well, I think part of the radios thing is like a causation and correlation mix up. It's that the myth that we have is that it was the fault of the radios that the operation goes wrong, whereas the operation is probably going wrong anyway, and the intermittent radio communication isn't helping the problem. I think that's where I would put it. It's, in a situation where things aren't going so well, better communication would have been an advantage. So I think people have been building too much. It's this convenient coat hanger. Well, it didn't work because the radios didn't work. And obviously, it's clearly not that simple. And Craig Swain has said radio comm is always a multi-factor equation, equipment variables, environment variables, and user variables, among others, to consider, even modern day. So, I mean, communications are prone to things going wrong, I guess.
And also, I was going to say, the point is there's a little bit of evidence as well that our mate Boyd Browning questioned the qualities of the divisional signals at Arnhem.
Yeah.
So I suppose he's looking around for another scapegoat. And if it's easy to say the radios didn't work, so I had no idea what was going on in the Arnhem Oosterbeek area because I was 10 miles away at Nijmegen, and the only time I heard about it was when somebody swam the river.
Yeah, and blaming equipment is a convenient way of not blaming personnel, although there are commanders at Arnhem who were quite happy to blame personnel, as we'll get to later on. But it's sort of a neutral way of saying, well, the radio didn't work, rather than that battalion didn't do their job or that commander there wasn't effective enough. It's a nice way of saying, well, you know, putting the blame onto something that isn't personal. So, yeah, but there you are. There's Norman Patton there. So
before we go on, Norman was a sergeant with the 1st Forward Observation Unit, Royal Artillery. Not sure off the top of my head who he's meant to be supporting, but never mind. So on the 21st of September, he decided to climb up that chimney on the picture in the right-hand side and strung up a 40-foot aerial. So obviously that height gave it the extra woof, shall we say, kick up the backside to be able to send messages down to the Nijmegen area, where people were trying to butt in, as I jokingly say, on someone else's net without the correct passwords, and obviously very, very interesting story behind this. Obviously, and I won't go too much into it, but obviously, you know, they were saying, "Who are you?" and they're saying, the people you are trying to join up with, etc., etc. Could it be a German pirate radio station? But there's all sorts of questions that were asked by, you know, my Christian name is Robert, and do you know Charles, and do you know what's your wife's favorite sport and whatever. And so they thought, yes, this is now through. And then, as it says, 1st Airborne, something had to be done. Our 4.5-inch battery reported ready. The Airborne gave us 2 targets. They gave us a 3rd, 2 corrections, and then scale 10, and that was only a warmer. So I think I usually play a game if those are the right words. I don't think we've done this before. If you look at the most heaviest offensive weapon of the Air Landing Light Regiment Arnhem, 75mm pack howitzers, firing a shell weighing 13 pounds. Down at Nijmegen, you've got the 64th Medium Regiment with shells ranging anything from sort of 45, 50 pounds up to over 100 pounds. So you imagine the weight of firepower that they can bring down from there is so much more greater than they could call for. And certainly a number of attacks were broken up by the 64th Medium Regiment. And just to bore you, one more little thing I don't often say as well. Roy Urquhart was so impressed with their shooting, those are the right words, some gunner will probably have a go at me, they're firing or whatever, that he asked that they be allowed to wear a Pegasus badge on their uniform.
Good point.
Which they did get. So here's one of the, I think, well, I'm gonna stick my neck out and say it's probably a 5.5 that. But firing from the area of Nijmegen up towards the Arnhem, well, the Oosterbeek pocket, shall we say.
Great
and as
photo.
I said, the blokes at Oosterbeek said they have not been told on so long without the guns at Nijmegen. So then, just to sort of give a more balanced view, shall we say, that the radios didn't work, Bill Marquand, who was the signals officer with the 1st Parachute Brigade, as you can see, few weeks prior to Market Garden, held an exercise near Grimsby, complete failure of radio communications expected to be brought in the town. So he said, greater supply of field telephones and cables, hoping their use. He was not to know that savage conditions under which the Gibraltar fight would thwart his plan, but his very existence answers the criticisms often expressed that signals equipment should have been tested beforehand. It had, and it had proved inadequate. So they knew the radios didn't work. They knew they didn't work in, as you said, North Africa, probably in Sicily, Italy, and Normandy. But I guess any lessons learned, it was almost probably a case of, well, shut up, get on with it, because there's nothing better. I suppose that's the other thing you've got to consider. What are you going to replace it with?
Yeah. Yeah. And Jay made the point of, if the radios did work, how would that have dramatically changed the outcome of the battle? And the thing is, with all that confusion, particularly when you kind of pushed as you've talked about, towards St. Elizabeth's Hospital, and people not necessarily knowing which street they're in and where they are on the street, would more communication have would have cured that situation? I mean, it couldn't have made it worse, but I don't think it's so cure-all that people might think it's going to be. It's just going to, things were going wrong, lots of German armor isn't helping. The radios isn't going to help with sugar around the corner, is it? It's just going to help you. So anyway,
I think the good answer to that question is poor old Tony Hibbert, didn't he? Got on the radio or got on the phone to Fitch with, mind you, he did have Lathry and Urquhart in tow, and said, you need to, come down to the bridge on the lower road. You've only been action for 3 or 4 hours, blah, 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 blah. But then this is another question is, had, say, another 400 men made the bridge area to put the bridge garrison up to, say, 1,000-ish, would that have made any difference? And I think the answer is no, because the supplies couldn't get through. Yeah.
It would have been an initial burst of extra, but 24 hours later, whatever, or even less, it would have been the same situation, because doesn't matter how many men you've got if you've got no bullets left.
I think that's one of the key things about the bridge at Arnhem, isn't it? Is logistics, and logistics.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just to throw a thing at the senior commanders, I know Frost, when he was on the radio or to Urquhart, basically said, we're desperately short of food, ammunition, and medical supplies. And Urquhart's advice was, send some Dutch civilians out. I think we might have come out in part 1, didn't it? He said, send some Dutch civilians out to go and get some supply containers and bring them back to you. Well, I'm sure that was going to work, wasn't it? So
yeah,
I've put that one in there. I don't know if anybody understands it. I certainly don't. Lewis Golden probably did, because he drew it. But obviously, this was the book I was talking about. If we go to the next one, and I would say, if you really, really want to know about the signals, it's a shame Lewis isn't with us anymore, but wrote a very, very good book. And it's only about 20 quid if you can find a copy secondhand. It's not one of the £300-400 ones. Quite an interesting read, obviously. And if you want to get into the signals, he I suppose, really, yes, Craig, I can't agree more with you.
Yeah. I mean, we'll carry on with the discussion. It's fantastic stuff. So, medical call. You touched on this one a little bit a couple of years ago.
I did indeed. Yeah, but I thought we'd bring it out again, because you've got one of the classic Arnhem shots, and obviously various sources, including a professor on a BVT. All the medics are unarmed. All the medics are either Quakers or conscientious objectors, and all the medics stay behind when the evacuation happens. Which is, yes. So reality, most of the medics are armed. And as I said, the Geneva Convention allows medical staff to be armed for the protection of themselves and their patients. And the official war establishment tables for a parachute field ambulance. If you go to the next one, you've got 123 pistols, 12 rifles 303, and 31 9mm Stens. Now, I suspect that last 43-ish would have been for the drivers of the Jeeps, the Royal Army Service Corps. But most of the medics had a automatic or a pistol with them, as I think the next 2 photographs might well show.
Yeah.
So this is on the left, on the right, Fred, my old mate Fred Budd from 181. Him and his mate, as you can clearly see, with a pistol in their belt. And then the next one is obviously, I think, one of the most iconic Arnhem photographs that gets used quite a lot. Midge Mills, our old mate Trooper Edmund, although obviously that's one of the censored photos, because you can see that his name has been widened out, Chipexed out. There's a good word for today. Just out the back of 9 Dukes Campsweg, and that, of course, was our old friend Bill Ryken, Wilhelmina Ryken. And you can clearly see just next to Midge's left arm the holster for his pistol. Yeah. And he's wearing a Red Cross armband.
Yeah. A good photographic evidence. We don't have to rely on just the Neil Cherry wisdom. We've got absolute hard photographic evidence. So, I
think the other thing to say is that a lot of the medics did actually throw their arms away, because they thought it was sort of a little bit dangerous to be seen openly walking around armed in such close quarters. I wouldn't say red berries and red crosses is worth a read. Someone's obviously read it. Anyway, the old chestnut are the Quakers and conscientious objectors, and I'm sure you'll like this one, Paul, because I think, as you said, we've touched on this before on the Quakers and the conscientious objectors. So out of the 630 medics who went to Arnhem, six were conscientious objectors, and I still can't get my head around. One of them was a glider pilot.
Okay.
I don't know how he managed to do it, but he was certainly was a glider pilot, and the other 5 were all medics. So if you look at the next one again, I think it's those coming back there, as you can see, one officer, that's Swinscoe from the Recce Squadron, and 30 other ranks. It's quite interesting just to look at the numbers. Of the 21st Independent Parachute Company, 5 medics went with them to Arnhem and 5 came back. So they actually had 100% return rate, which is somewhat unusual for a unit, if you consider one of the smaller units.
Yeah, great stuff.
Well, yes.
Now this is the big one. When I saw that in the slide, I was like, "Whoa, that's a big one."
Yes. Well, I don't think really it's Middlebrook. My old mate Martin Middlebrook does sort of touch it briefly in his excellent book on Arnhem, but I don't really think this is touched on too much, shall we say, when you're looking critically at the 1st Parachute Brigade in the early hours at Arnhem. And as I said, he had been tasked with the glamour role, responsible for taking and getting the 3 bridges over the Rhine. Broad fronts, 2 of his infantry heading for the bridges and 1 for some high ground north of Arnhem, already hamstrung by the plan. He opted for speed. If serious opposition was met, the unit might not be able to break through. If he advanced on a narrow front, 2 units on the same progress might become unwieldy. So he hoped that at least part of his brigade slipped through to the bridges, but he had no reserve if anything went wrong, which I suppose is a fair enough point, isn't it? So,
yeah.
And now this is no doubt this will get me some bad press, no doubt. Was the 1st Parachute Brigade the right choice to go to the bridges? And I'm going to say, in my view, possibly not. They were the last to land, obviously, if you consider it. They came in on the 3rd wave, 3rd serial, 10 past 2 in the afternoon. So it wasn't till gone 3 o'clock, realistically, where they were in some sort of position to move off. A few vital hours, hamming around, whatever. And the 1st Air Landing Brigade, I call them the second-class citizens, and I'm sure most serious historians, researchers, enthusiasts will probably agree with me that the 1st Air Landing Brigade were looked down the noses at by the 1st Parachute Brigade looked down their noses at the air landing guys.
And that's universal. That's the same with the Americans. It's the same with the Germans and Fallschirmjäger and Luftwaffe ground troops. That seems to be a regular thing that if you're not proper para, you're not the best. So that seems to, for me, that seems to be a fairly universal thing. That there's a tendency to look down on those that aren't actually jumping out of an aircraft. So we'll move on to your next slide. Loving this.
So here we are. Should the Air Landing Brigade play a bigger role? So yes, in theory, as I said, if you'd think about it, I know it was only 2.5 battalions because obviously the Browning had taken or been allocated 38 gliders, which meant the South Staffs, some of whom had to come in on the next lift. So if he hadn't have gone, 1st Air Landing Brigade probably could have come in their entirety, shall we say. Landed soon after 1:30, would have probably been formed up by 1:45, and certainly an hour before even the 1st Parachute Brigade have even landed. Numerically stronger and better armed, and this, of course, is a really controversial one. Leave the 1st Parachute Brigade on the DZ area to act as guard force, and use the same area for the 4th Parachute Brigade the next day and accept losses because they had losses going to DZY. Yeah.
I have to say, I find it very difficult to argue with that. And I'm not an Arnhem guy like you are, but when you look at the equipment the Air Landing Brigade guys have, you get a little bit more punch, a little bit, earlier. If it's an hour earlier, that can make all the difference.
Yeah. And if you look at the next one, I think that's one. Yeah. So, Parachute Battalion, 40 minutes to RV, ready to move off. Air Landing Battalion, platoon formed up in seconds. Euston 1 being a prime example. And then we go to as I call it, the numbers game. So the Parachute Battalion, 550, Air Landing Battalion about 750.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
Then I think this is the real crux of the matter, isn't it? You've got three rifle companies in the parachute battalions, 4 in the air landing, rifle platoons in a rifle company in a parachute battalion, 3, an extra 1 in the air landing battalion, 2 mortar platoons against 1, 2 medium machine gun platoons against 1, 2 anti-tank platoons against 1, and not one with Berets. They've got 6-pounder anti-tank guns and Berets. But of course, the big but underlined, looked upon as class citizens by the parachute troops. Lathbury and his brigade, in theory, the most experienced troops.
Yeah.
Urquhart, relatively new in post. Was he prepared to upset his senior commander, who had been privately promised command of the division? And I think the answer to that is Urquhart took the easy way out and said, no, you can have the plum jobs, Gerald.
It's I love it when you give me things to think about, you know. So yeah. Moving on.
Oh yes, the classic, a well-known. I saw a TV program about Arnhem with a well-known historian. I won't name him, but his surname began with J. All the company were enemy aliens and took Scottish names. So if you drill down to it, in the Second World War, 22 enemy aliens were accepted into the company, and in reality 886 of the company went to Arnhem, and 11 of those 22 were foreigners, shall we say. So if we look there, 11 men with wonderful Scottish names such as Bruce, Dawson, Melford, Stanley, Bleach, Gordon, Blakely, Landon and Lewis. The only one who's got a Mac in there was the McManus.
Would it be similar numbers in the 22nd independent parachute company as well, do you think?
That is a good question.
Because I've heard that one about Normandy. I've heard when I first moved here, I remember people telling me, don't forget all the Pathfinders in Normandy were German Jews, etc., etc. And when I looked into it, I couldn't find much at all about it.
Have you got a nominal roll of the company?
No.
Well, that would help, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
We'll perhaps talk privately about that one.
Yeah, but you're doing some fantastic stop going this. But I mean, and one day we could do the backstory about this. But I mean, I think it's fairly clear from, you know, these are, as you said, they are enemy aliens who are serving under a different name to help protect their identity and their ancestry. But again, that the story has been taken out of proportion. There were some, but it wasn't like they all were. So that's that. And again, you've put the actual deed of there are the names. So again, we cannot question your.
I mean, I've got to say, obviously, so this is an interesting one, isn't it? So this is another one where I struggle to follow the logic sometimes of what happens on a headstone, because you've got our old mate Hans Rodley on the left, gets his full name and served as J.P. Rodley, and then our old mate Langdon, who was Lingen from memory on the previous slide, he doesn't get anything. He just gets his normal Langdon, and obviously he was Jewish, but he's probably decided to adopt Church of England's religion just on his papers, just to hopefully protect him a little bit better.
But it could just be that the family haven't, or someone hasn't put the case in and saying, because I know with one of the Normandy guys, and I think it was a guy in number 10 commando or something, the grave did used to say his adopted British Christian name, and I went back a couple of years later that it now had, and he'd served as, and they had the Jewish star there as well. So maybe it just needs someone to put that paperwork on it and tell the Commonwealth War Graves, did you know? Because and then maybe it would be corrected, because I know they are doing that. So
absolutely. Well, I suppose in theory it fits in nicely with their many religions charter, shall we say? Yeah.
Oh well, good stuff. And you've got the photographic evidence again.
One is quite. So obviously I've just nicked a little bit from my good friend Peter Geibel's book, and obviously in the nominal roll both service numbers are listed if known. So this is the interesting thing, as you can see, they were allowed to have a new name. Harold Schilling wanted to choose. I think this is a great story. The almost unpronounceable family name of
Colquhoun.
Colquhoun, something like
it
that.
could be something else. Someone will say,
Yes.
no, there's probably a silent L or something. Yeah.
Yeah, Colquhoun or something like that. Harold Bruce, he decided to end up. And as you can see, they, in the records, company records, this is certified that 1-3 Harold's Private Shilling changed his name under Warwick authorities to Private Bruce Harold Cole Edwin on or about the 5th of May. Colquhoun, yeah, I think we'll go with that.
Yeah, well done, Tamsin. Thank you.
1943, and I think that's a great little little card, shall we say? Nicked it from Peter's book.
Borrowed. I think it's a better word. Borrowed. Yeah.
Borrowed. No, Peter's a good friend of mine. So you're going to believe this. I actually met him in Normandy. We haven't seen each other a couple of years, and there I am in St Mary Glees, and there he is as well. Anyway, move on. I just unashamedly, if you do want to know about the company and the Jews and all the rest of it, you need to have a look for Leading the Way to Arnhem. It's unashamed plug. If anybody wants to contact me, I've got about 15 copies in my garage, and it's very close to being out of print again. So, and it's unlikely to be reprinted again. So, if you want a copy of,
put me down for one because I haven't got that one.
All right.
I've been having on a limiting what books I buy period because I had run out of shelf space. But Mag allowed me to buy 3 new Billy bookshelves in my office, so I've actually got some expansion room now for the first time.
I'll put one aside for you, my friend.
Definitely do that. Yeah, I've seen it in the shop, and I've back in the day, and I haven't bought it. So there we are. This is another doozy. I'm looking forward to your explanation.
Well, again, this is all personal opinion, isn't it? You know, because there's nothing really in the records apart from saying that the Americans were unhappy at flying twice in one day. They were not skilled enough in navigation and formation flying. Obviously, we know of the chaos that was caused at Sicily and Normandy by having nighttime drops. And so I think Market Garden was always going to be a daylight drop. But why didn't it start at 11 o'clock in the morning? Your guess is as good as mine. Garden would start once it was clear Market had left the air bases. Why didn't they take off at 7? Why did they not take off till 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock? And I think we need to move on realistically because we've talked through that one, if you don't mind. The US, I said, the US were happy to take off at 700 on D+1 with the 4th Parachute Brigade, but weren't happy on D-Day to take off till about 10:30. No, I've never been able to find a reason for that. If any United States Army Air Force expert is in there, love to know that. Garden should not kicked off in the morning, not 4:30. And again, that would have given the Germans perhaps even something more to think about by rushing troops south if they had kicked off at 7 o'clock in the morning and then finding an airborne landings to their rear at 2 o'clock or even 11 o'clock. 4 hours later, that would have given the Germans something really, and I think they would have been in even more of a panic state than they were already.
Yeah, and people are just saying, just saying it's hindsight. You know, I mean, that's the thing we've talked about so many times. You know, you go into a pub with Paul Reed is in the audience. You know, you just throw Arnhem into the room there, and everyone's got an opinion about could have done this, why didn't they do that, and they're fantastic conversations, but it's all post-event analysis. How many years have you, me, and Paul Reed spent discussing Arnhem? I mean, it would be what, over 100 years, wouldn't it? If you add our 3, so yeah, no wonder people like yourself have come up with a few conclusions in that time. Yeah,
and I think realistically, I think if we go on the next one, don't we? This isn't really we've finished the myths, haven't we? Really?
Yeah.
And I was like when we were talking about it, I said I don't think I've got enough myths for one. We've got enough myths for 1.5 programs, so that's why I called it a dose of controversy at the end as well.
Yeah, controversies and things for further investigation. Yeah. So
yes.
I mean, this is another dude. This one comes up in every conversation I ever read on Facebook, which I shouldn't do. And I tell myself I shouldn't dive in. It's always the Berets fanboys, the Montgomery, and it's always about, well, Browning took his headquarters there. So I'd love to hear what you've got to say about this.
Well, he did. But of course, I think, I mean, as I've said to you before, Paul, on this program and to you when we've been chatting offline, I'm not a fan of Browning. Probably the right man back in London, England, whatever, to fight the corner politically well connected, knew the royal family, all these sorts of people, moved in the right social circles. His wife being, well, here's another classic one I saw yesterday, because if you know who designed the Pegasus badge, don't you?
Well, I'm going to say Daphne du Maurier, but you'll probably tell me I'm wrong.
You are wrong.
Okay.
Major Edward Seago, and it's in By Air to Battle. But again, I saw it. Daphne du Maurier designed. Was
it her who suggested Browning's boating colours, or is
racing colours?
Right, racing. So she is involved in the story somewhere.
But she didn't design it anyway. So Browning obviously was GOC, 1st British Airborne Corps, Deputy Commander, 1st Allied Airborne Army. His boss was, as I said, was an airman with no combat experience, realistically. And also he wasn't a soldier, he was an airman. So he obviously looked at Browning for all of his, what's the word I'm looking for? For all of his ground-based, all that digging trenches malarkey that I don't get involved with. Where's the 5-star hotel? Browning had complained to Brereton, Linnet 2. Brereton had threatened to sack him. Browning off his resignation. Operation was cancelled, but it can't have been a nice atmosphere. And as I say, Market Garden, potentially Browning's last chance to get some combat experience, in inverted commas, on his CV before the end of the war, because he had been basically not commanded troops in any sort of action in the Second World War, been flying the desks, getting splinters in his arse, etc., and wanted to do something because it wouldn't look good. I suspect at the back of his mind, it wouldn't have looked good on his CV. Well, what have you done in the war compared to that bloke over there who's commanded a corps in combat? And his corps headquarters was more paper pushers, shall we say, never operated as a corps in the fields, etc., but he said, I've got to go.
And
I think this is another one of those, I think whoever was, what's the word I'm looking for, casting the cast for A Bridge Too Far, didn't do a bad job with Dirk Bogarde, compared to, very smartly, well-spoken Englishman, blah, 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 blah. And that wonderful photograph of him taken with Jim Gavin. And I don't think
I'm sure it was in Sean Connery's autobiography when he went for the role of Urquhart. Bogarde was being touted to play Urquhart.
Right.
And then Sean Connery came into the question, and Richard Attenborough said, "Okay, in that case, then Bogarde, you go to Browning, and Connery goes to be Urquhart." And I wonder how differently we would perceive Urquhart's actions if Urquhart had been played by Dirk Bogarde, because I said this before so many times. When I see Sean Connery, or basically when I see James Bond shoot the German through the window in Arnhem, part of me is thinking, fuck yeah, James Bond's just killed a German, because I just have that sort of respect for Sean Connery and the Bond idea. If it had been Browning, I think I'd have been far more critical of why is Urquhart doing that? Why is Urquhart getting himself? I think Connery's casting has forever improved how we all perceive Urquhart, and I think Bogarde's casting has forever affected how we portray General Browning. Yes. I'm not saying Dirk Bogarde is a bad actor or anything like that, but I think by the 1970s he was more known for his kind of art house movies.
Yes.
In the 50s, he was the dashing, rank young player, but I think in the 70s he was seen as a bit kind of avant-garde and a bit, So I know that's Woody's.
No, I think rabbit hole there. I must admit, I've never read Sean Connery's autobiography, but that is I didn't know that, and that sounds good, because when you look at it, Roy Urquhart was 6'3" anyway, 16 stone, great hulking man, facially very similar. And as you said, Roy Urquhart always used to go in Sicily and North Africa. He liked to be up the front, seeing what was happening. So for him to shoot a German through the window was not unexpected, shall we say. And I think, as you said, people in their mind recognise him as James Bond, and it does, as you said, doesn't. James Bond used to kill people.
Yeah, And I think, I mean, I remember my first time going into the Hartenstein Hotel when I was whatever age I was, 18 years old, and I saw the mannequin there, and it was like Sean Connery. That was, I think everybody has that reaction there. But yeah. Anyway, you were going to say more about Dirk Bogarde?
Well, I think we do on the next slide, don't I?
That's right. Yeah.
Yes, here we are. Yes. So as I said, he's Airborne Corps HQ in inverted commas. No experience as operating as a proper corps to the middle area, because in theory he came under command of, he would have come under command of 30 Corps when they arrived, used 38 gliders, went to the middle area. What did he achieve by coming? And my answer is, had his photo taken and attended a few meetings. That's obviously a personal view.
No problem at all. Right, on we go. Controversies.
There we go. So really into the controversy section. Eisenhower versus Monty, Bradley and Patton.
Right, moving on. Yeah.
Yes, please. Why not? Eisenhower, Monty, Bradley, Patton. Obviously, everyone's subject close to everyone's heart. The D-Day breakout in mid to late August. Allied supply lines close to breaking point. Monty and Patton both crying out supplies. Eisenhower had a difficult choice. 1st of September, this is another thing that I wouldn't say upsets me somewhat when you start seeing a documentary about D-Day and they keep talking about Field Marshal Montgomery commanded the troops on D-Day, which of course, yes, should divisional kill the enemy with a sidearm? No, is the answer to that. But of course,
I think we all agree with that.
Another one of my unanswered questions, Paul, and I often discuss on the ground or pose to my lovely passengers on the ground. Why did Urquhart go forward on the morning of the 18th rather than back to his divisional HQ? And he has never satisfactorily answered that question.
No.
Let's move on. So Field Marshal Monty, 1st of September, took over after Eisenhower took over as Land Forces Commander. So Monty's seething a bit, I should imagine, in the background. And if we could go to the next one, please. Eisenhower did not favour the dreaded narrow front. Monty did convince Bradley it might work. And this is, I think, is an important one. And I don't think people give this one enough priority in the grand scheme of things for Market Garden. The V2s arriving in London around about the 8th of September from memory. And they were being launched from the Netherlands. And we had no defence against them. And this is one of my another unanswered questions, comments. Has Churchill been on the phone to Roosevelt and said, look, Teddy, these V2s are arriving. I've got no defence. If Monty's given priority, if you can tell Eisenhower to give Monty a bit of priority, we can liberate Holland. We can take the V2 problem away. We can take the rocket problem away, and everyone's happy.
That's a very good point. And I know we're talking about V2s here, but when I did a show with Steve about the V1s landing, which of course was just after D-Day, they really rattled civil defense. They really rattled the RAF. There was a real sense of kind of panic. They'd got their systems in post the Blitz, and with the V2, everything was exponentially worse because of the suddenness and nothing you can do about them. So, we kind of forget now that there was real V2 panic for a while, as they had building on what had been a very real V1 reaction a few months earlier. So yeah, that makes sense to me.
Not enough, as you said, not enough supplies to go round. Obviously, people don't realise that. I mean, I try and tell it on the ground, don't you? If you've got a lorry coming up from Aramanch with petrol, it's got to have a lot of it on board that it can't deliver because it needs it to fill up its tank or diesel and then get back again. So not enough supplies to go round. Monty gets priority in early September, and obviously his mate George is not happy.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, can't argue with that. The plans.
So 17th of August, Monty, Bradley agreed a 6-point plan. The two army groups, solid mass, 40 divisions, so strong for nothing, moved northeastwards, clear the Channel coast, part of Calais, West Flanders, Antwerp and South Holland. 12th Army Group in the Ardennes, Aachen and Cologne. The whole movement was put on Paris. Dragoon would come up from the southern front, Nancy and the Saar, and the basic objective of the movement was to establish a powerful air force in Belgium, to establish bridges over the Rhine before winter began, and to seize the Ruhr quickly.
Yeah.
So even then, they're still looking to get over the Rhine in 1944.
Yeah. And I think we did a whole series of shows about the kind of the August, September period. I think one of the problems the Allies are facing is there's now too many options. Earlier in the war, there was the only option was to react to what the Germans are doing. Then there's kind of the North Africa kind of it takes care of itself because it's all about ports and things like that. Then Tunisia, you've got to get to Tunis. I think by the time you get this period, there's so many options that the Allies just where you've got to go for the Rhine, but which way do you go for the Rhine? Which is the focus? And I think if you have, it's like when you go to a restaurant and there's too many things on the menu. Yes. Too many things is worse than just a few things to choose from, because you then go, I don't know now. And I think the Allies are they're almost a bit spoiled in a sense by so many options that it clouds the issue, I think. And I think, in a weird way, the Allies react better when the Germans do something like the Bulge, because then they have to react to what the Germans are doing again, which means it concentrates your thinking. And I think that at this point, August, September is a really weird period for me, because they didn't want to go to, I know we're going down a massive rabbit hole, Neil, but no one wanted to go to Paris anyway, and they ended up going to Paris. Patton's Third Army's got really embroiled in Brittany, and things have gone in different directions that weren't kind of there in the planning a few weeks earlier. And I think it's a fascinating period. I've come to really appreciate the complications. And then you add Market Garden into the mix, and it becomes very interesting.
And I think the old friend logistics, and the V2s coming into it as well.
Yeah, Jay just said that logistics was logistically stretched. The answer should have been to prioritize ports, which means a northern thrust. And I think ports. Anyway, well.
The problem with the ports is the Germans were probably going to blow them up. That's the problem, wasn't it? Because how long
you get to them, you take heavy losses, take them, and the Germans have fucked them up, so you can't use them. So I think port focus has become less of an importance than it had been a few weeks earlier. But anyway, we're going down a massive rabbit hole. Back to Eisenhower.
I was unhappy with the plan. Weeks of arguing, a broad front strategy ensued. However, eventually Ike agreed to part of Monty's plan, and Patton and Bradley in the Saar should halt operations, which as you might imagine, went down like lead over boots. Patton remained unrestrained by Bradley. I think that's quite a killing few words. Regardless of how Patton's Third Army continued to thrust eastwards. 17th of September, where do we know that date from? Launched an attack on Metz. And it found Hodges found itself unable to launch a diversionary attack on the right flank of 21st Army Group to assist in the prosecution of Market Garden. Allies at war, as other people have put it.
Yeah, and this is when Hodges is dealing with what some people say is a real kind of mental breakdown or collapse, as well as physical health things. So there's lots of issues. Hodges never gets talked about enough, and I think Hodges is having a bad year, I think, or a bad second half of the year, just health wise, which is worth
his
adding.
Problem started when he landed in Normandy.
It's not been fun. Yeah, Browning and Gavin. Let's move on.
So I've finished off on the Eisenhower. So this again is almost like a personal type of opinion. You've got Gavin's boss, if you think about it, is Browning. Deputy Commander, 1st Allied Airborne Army, so he outranks him. Again, quite a nice, the well turned out, isn't it, Browning? Not sure when that photograph was taken, because I thought he qualified as a glider pilot, but he's obviously not got his wings on in that photograph.
Yeah, don't know.
Anyway, so those two boys. So was the Battle of, this is an old chestnut, and I'm sure it's almost like a myth, but it's more of a controversy, isn't it? Was the Battle of Arnhem lost at Nijmegen? It's much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
But you can argue that Nijmegen was important. Browning convinced Gavin that the Groesbeek heights were more important than taking the Whale bridges. Yes, he did. Did Gavin not give the Whale bridges more priority because Browning and his DZs, LZs needed protecting for the second lift? Probably. Browning can be seen to as worried because he told 20th Flight of B Squadron of the Glider Pilot Regiment after landing on LZS they were to move to Groesbeek to act as additional security for his HQ. and the OC was told to get there by whatever means available. And when he got on the ground, he said, I'm not doing that. So that gives you some idea of the optimism of the plan. You want about 30 guys to somehow move from the Wolfhazer Renkum area over to Nijmegen. Don't care how they get across the river. They've got to get across a river that's held, most of the anyway. But as I say, the point, certainly the delay in taking the WoW British hurt 1st Airborne deeply.
Yeah, we had Jeff McGavin on, who's former 505th and now a US Air Force historian a couple of weeks ago, and he's saying that he doesn't think Gavin did anything wrong as such. His main point was that Gavin was given too much to do, too many tasks. And I found it difficult to disagree with that. And I certainly agree with you that just pinning it all on because he focused on the Grosbeak Heights is oversimplifying a lot of things that are befalling the plan at this point.
Yeah. But as I said, neither of them here to protect themselves. Browning, I don't think ever wrote any memoirs, or if he did, they're a closely guarded secret, probably still in the family. Some bloke did write a book about Browning, which I wasn't a great fan of. And of course, after the war, Browning, as we will see, Browning did his best to flow the blame for Market Garden downhill. And then
blame a foreigner. We'll come to that later. Blame the foreigner. Blame Johnny Foreigner. Yeah.
Right. Let's go on. The two Hackett against Hicks, the brigadiers at war, shall we say? So let's go to the next one, please, just to show you the pictures. So Hicks on the left and Hackett on the right. One more. Again, sort of touched on it. Urquhart and Lathbury out of touch. Gone into town when Lathbury quite rightly should have gone into town, see how his brigade was getting on. But why Roy Urquhart didn't go back to Div HQ morning of the 18th, we'll never know realistically. Out of touch, believed he may have been killed or captured. So Charles Mackenzie, the GSO1, asked Hicks to take over because he was the only senior officer available. And interestingly enough, I've got a DVD that I've now found in the last couple of months has come on YouTube, and it's called Arnhem 25th Anniversary, made in black and white. And it is a very, very interesting watch because you will find Hackett, Urquhart, Alan Adair, Charles Mackenzie, Kate Horst, Willie Beatrix, Jimmy Edwards, and a few other people, as some private soldiers, have all been interviewed by it. And Hicks is not in the programme, but Hackett, I don't know whether managed to get him airbrushed out of it. But in this documentary, he can see that even 25 years later, he is still bitter about what happened at Arnhem. And he was still bitter in the over 50 years later. I have a story that my friend Robert told me, that he was a man in the King's Own Scottish Border who was a private in 1944, later rose to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in the army, was at one of the cocktail parties in the Hartenstein, went up to Hackett in a quiet moment and asked him a question about the handling of the King's Own Scottish Borderers. And he said, and Hackett's answer was, that is a most inappropriate question for a social evening, please go away. There you are. Anyway,
I went to a lecture when I was about 17 or something by Colonel John Frost, and even that was a long time ago. We're talking near 39 years ago or something. I remember it was like a version of that old BBC show Room 101, where basically Frost just listed everybody who fucked up except him. It was really. It started off slightly amusing, and then after about 45 minutes, most people in the audience were a lot older than me. Everyone was starting to squirm a bit because he was blaming Hicks and Hackett, and it was like, I'm I'm saying that we disagree with him. It felt a bit unrelenting. Just blame, and I'm glad I went, and I wish it had been videoed. I think he was doing the circuit then. I don't know why.
Yeah, it was probably the Imperial War Museum or somewhere like that because they used to.
Yeah, I think it was the Imperial War Museum. But
and I've just thought of something there that never really thought of it before. But what else could Hicks do when he took over apart from? He knew that the 2nd Battalion were at the bridge.
Yeah.
They knew that the 1st and the 3rd Battalions potentially hadn't been able to get through. They needed reinforcements. What is he supposed to do apart from to send more units into Arnhem?
Yeah.
And when he took over, when you look at it, the King's Own Scottish Borderers couldn't be used. The Border Regiment couldn't be used because they were both doing security duties. So all he had was half of the South Staffs, which he sent into town straight away, or in his words, straight away, or as soon as he could. And then when you look at it on the map, where the 11th Battalion were rendezvousing on DZY, they were the obvious choice to go. But of course, military etiquette, Hackett sort of said, normal form would be to ask the brigade commander to nominate a unit, not bloody, whatever. And of course, Urquhart had said to Charles Mackenzie that if anything to happen to him, Lathbury should take over. And after that, it should be Hackett and Hicks in that order, but didn't tell the other brigadiers. Hackett was unhappy with what was going on in the evening. So on the evening, the 18th, went to Div HQ at the Hartenstein to confront Hicks, as I say. And I think we could go to the next.
Yeah, I'll put it on. Yeah.
So he added that if Lathbury Hicks then Hackett, information was not passed to the two brigadiers. It was senior in the list to Hicks, which probably didn't go down well with him being an old school regular, shall we say.
Yeah.
Hackett missing. As I said, went to there, called it a grossly untidy situation. Him and Hicks got into argument, wanted to coordinate his brigade's moves with other people's units, fire support, whatever. Mackenzie was supposedly asleep, woken by one of the staff officers. You need to come, sir. The two brigadiers are having a flaming row. The situation, as I said, was sort of resolved, but it burnt deep with Hackett. And I'm sure it can't have been fun later at any of the Urquhart's O groups.
Yeah,
when they were probably standing on different sides of the table, shall we say.
And again, I think it's a little bit like the radios thing, in that clearly it was awkward that there hadn't been this clear instructions left and no one knew where Urquhart was. Clearly it was an issue. But I can't see that a better situation in terms of leadership would have, as you said, dramatically changed the situation, because all they could do is just keep piling units into Arnhem and hope for the best. So I don't know whether a clearer decision made earlier is going to make a dramatic difference. It just, all it did really was fuel this bitterness between the various people then and after the war. No, it's grossly untidy situation. It was, fantastic stuff. Brits v American. This another one to get people going. A personal one, I think. Obviously, I think Market Garden was a big step in the breakdown of the Anglo-American relationship, which had started at Falaise. The row crossing at Nijmegen on the 21st of September 1944. Obviously, there are varying conflicts, accounts, decisions, what actually happened, two sides to the story. I don't think we'll ever really know. This is one of those moments in history, Woody, wouldn't it, where he said, where would you like to be as an onlooker with your stopwatch and clipboard? Yeah. And I think the north end of the Wow Road Bridge in Nijmegen on the 21st of September at about 6:30 to 7 o'clock, or even at that conference as well that took place beforehand in the power station. You've got various people saying that, even Richard Holmes in his classic, excellent documentary on Arnhem basically says that, Horrocks' sense of urgency had not percolated down to the Grenadier Guards, I think is the comment. And obviously the next one, I think, as well, is a good one. According to one eyewitness, will your tanks be lined up ready to go non-stop to Arnhem? And apparently Horrocks has said yes. I would say this is one of those ones. You could imagine, and I know some of the junior US airborne commanders unhappy at taking heavy losses, taking the Wow, and the classic Brits are having tea, aren't they? Drinking tea. It's much more complicated than that. And I'm wondering whether Gavin fed the lack of urgency into this chain of command. Because he would have had his ear bent, no doubt, by people like Julian Cook, saying, I've just lost, 50% of my blokes crossing a river in daylight. For what purpose? But the thing is, as you take groups to Normandy as well, Neil. If Normandy the airborne landings hadn't gone as well, I think you'd have found exactly the same recriminations and breakdown of relationships between commandos and airborne, American airborne and American tank units, American infantry and American airborne. It's just that Normandy worked well, basically. Yeah. So there was no need to kind of amplify and put a spotlight on tensions. But in an operation like this, where it isn't going well, of course, everything is made worse, and the niggles come out, and the disagreements come out, and the misinterpretations and the cultural differences, and the way the British maybe are sarcastic when they speak, and all of these are going to be exaggerated and made worse when things are going badly. So I'm not saying there isn't smoke without fire, but I'm saying that in these situations, of course, it makes things worse.
It does, and as I said, Gavin being a divisional commander, he would have reported that up his chain of command, saying, my guys have taken, in my head, we've taken the stuff in at Nijmegen, and the Brits let us down badly. Yeah.
Anyway, let's keep on going.
Yes. The classic Horrocks, Browning, Thomas versus our old mate Gene Hackman, Sosabowski. Obviously, Gene Hackman, Stanislaw Sosabowski, bit of an outspoken critic, shall we say, or always happy to speak his mind, shall we say. Managed to get just a few troops across the river on the 23rd using some rubber boats that the 1st Airborne had managed to find. Then he gets called, isn't it? Taking a step back. In the morning, Adair, Horrocks, Browning, probably a few others, go to the church tower in Drill to have a look at the scene for themselves with the binoculars. Then they go back to this place called Valberg, and they hold a conference at which Sosabowski is then told you need to go. He takes his interpreter with him, Jerry Deidre, and we're not sure exactly when this photograph, so we probably think this one is taken out beforehand. So you've got Browning, who is Corps Commander, Thomas 43rd Wessex Commander, Horrocks 30 Corps Commander, and Sosabowski Commander of the 1st Parachute Brigade. They hold it in a tent in an orchard in Valberg, and I think if we go to the next one, this one is taken afterwards, probably. When poor old Gene Hackman goes into the tent, even before he goes in, I think Horrocks says to Jerry Deidre, who is Sosabowski's interpreter, there's no need for you to go in the tent. He said, I was with your general the other day. He speaks reasonable English. He'll understand everything that's going on. But Deidre sort of goes to Browning, thinking that this could be curtains for the Polish Parachute Brigade. So he goes to Browning. Browning goes to Horrocks, and he agrees that Deidre can come into the meeting. So when the two of them do go into the tent, there are all of the British lined up on one side of the table and one chair the other side. Deidre's not allowed to sit. He's got to stand behind him, translate as much as possible. Basically, there's like a few words from Thomas, says that, the 129th, I think it is, Brigade will cross the river tonight. Sosabowski, you will be under the command of this Brigadier Walton. You will follow on. And that was basically it. No idea of what time, apart from the timings, I guess. No, what was to happen next. No firepower support. No questions asked by a British officer. And basically, this is enough for Sosabowski. Deidre actually admitted that he couldn't translate everything that was said for fear to have upsetting Gene Hackman even more. So in the end, Sosabowski explodes. He basically says, your crossing will achieve nothing. You need to cross further down the river where there are less Germans or no Germans. The sons of Britain as well as Poland are going to die, and it will all make no difference whatsoever. And apparently Horrocks just said, those are my orders, Sosabowski, and you will carry them out. And if you don't, I'll get somebody else to carry them out for you. Browning doesn't say a word. And that's basically the end of the conference. And it is said, isn't it, in this photograph that Thomas, who is on the right, is talking to Lieutenant Colonel Stevens on the left, and he's not even speaking to you, Sosabowski. So again, I think they're almost already started looking for someone to blame for this.
Yeah. Really interesting stuff. Yeah.
So Browning does invite invite him to lunch in his headquarters in Nijmegen. And that's basically, as it says on the caption there, Browning had not said a word in support of Sosabowski in the chorus who did right lunch. And as you can see, not only is Sosabowski eating an apple, there is one on the camouflage netting on the bonnet of the windscreen.
Interesting.
Right. Yes. So moving swiftly on. Well, so that's character assassinated poor old Gene Hackman for a while.
Yeah.
And then obviously after the battle, the blame game part 1, Browning versus Sosabowski. So we'll go to the next one. Browning blames Sosabowski, possibly to protect himself. My words, and he got his retaliation in writing. So 20th of November, just before he decides to go to the Far East to take over as Chief of Staff to Dickie Mountbatten out there. I won't read the whole letter. If people want to come back to it, it said, I have the honour, typical, senior officer, I have the honour to bring the following facts. Proved himself extremely difficult to work with. Distinct impression that he was raising objections and causing difficulties as he did not feel his brigade for batter. I made it absolutely clear, no uncertain concerns. I was the sole judge of efficiency of his brigade. Go to the next one. The letter continues. Unable to adapt himself to the level of a parachute brigade commander, much left to his chief of staff, blah, 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 blah. The officer worried both me and my staff. And then I'm not really sure about this comment, who were at that time fighting a very difficult battle to keep the corridor open from inclusive Nijmegen to Eindhoven. Well, Horrocks has written that he said it was his job to keep the corridor open. So I don't know who Browning was mythic. He almost, to me, thinking about it now, that's an Adolf Hitler. He's commanding units. He's moving units around that he doesn't even command or even exist, shall we say. I was forced finally to be extremely curt to this officer and order him to carry orders without query or obstruction. And then he yes, Terry Down. The answer to that is yes. 30 Corps 43rd Division will bear up my criticism. Recommend should be employed elsewhere, and a younger, more flexibly incorporated be available to succeed him. Which is basically what he does, doesn't he? He goes on to say. Give some appointments. The appointment must relate largely to the Polish army. Blah blah blah.
It's not even a shit sandwich. It's not even where he starts with a begrudging compliment and finishes with some kind of begrudging compliment, and then the middle bit is all the things he found wrong. It's just unrelenting from beginning to end, and all they're like, and if you speak to other people, they'll just think exactly the same as me. I mean, it's really nasty. I mean, it is. We, even if Sosabowski had fucked up, which I don't think he did. I mean, no one. I mean, everybody gets certain aspects, could have done better, blah blah blah. But even if he had fucked up, it still would be a shitty letter. It would still be a crappy letter to a fellow officer.
Yeah, when you consider he should have arrived on the 19th, didn't arrive till the 21st, 25% of his brigades didn't get there and they end up jumping into the American area. Got told as well when he left England, don't worry, use the drill ferry to get across the river. Yeah. When the drill ferry's not working, there's no boats. And he makes a classic comment, and he said, who the hell was in charge of 30 Corps when you're crossing 8 or 9 major waterways and you've got your boats 40 miles down the column? I mean, that's another sort of nail in your own coffin, isn't it, at the end of the day?
I mean, Nicholas made a point in the sidebar about Sosabowski's not an angel, and I don't think any of us would say he is. I mean, and he can be very prickly, and he wasn't necessarily the best working with others, but that's an absolute. That letter is just nasty. I'm sorry, it's just nasty.
And as I forget who it was, said he then buggered off to the Far East as Chief of Staff to Dickie Mountbatten.
Yeah. It's like a real sort of, but I'm fucking off anyway.
Yeah. So I'll shut on somebody else.
I mean, the thing is, we're going down a massive rabbit hole, but people like Montgomery and Bradley just kept having to work together. So although they had tantrums and they threw their teddies out of their pram and Eisenhower got involved, they still had to keep on working together. And yes, it probably got to another low point in the Ardennes, But Browning he's got the luxury of just buggering off to the other side of the world, so he hasn't got to maintain any relationship. He's just gone. I mean, it's hard to defend Browning with regards to that letter. That's anyway. Let's move on to your final slide and your final thoughts.
Slide. Yes. I'm not sure Prince Bernhard said them exactly in those words, but Monty said Market Garden 90% successful. Prince Bernhard said my country cannot suffer with no 90% successful Montgomery operation. As we said, Sosabowski got sacked, treated shamefully at the end of the war, just like some other generals. Polish troops not allowed to take part in the 1945 victory parade. Poor old Stan Sosabowski worked as a storeman in the electrical factory in Acton. Polish troops not allowed to take in the victory parade. Brown, as we said, went to the Far East. General Urquhart, Major General Roy Urquhart, never received another promotion. But it didn't do, others did. Lafferty, Frost, Hackett, and others who served at Arnhem made high rank. King, Frank King became a general. He was the 11th Battalion. Philip Tower was in the Royal Artillery, became a Lieutenant General. And obviously Tony doing Drummond Major all the way up to Major General, I think, again as well. Commander of the SAS, etc., etc. So Arnhem didn't do that bad, and I did see some sort of comment about Walcheren or the Scheldt Estuary pop up.
Yeah, I mean, people are saying what could have been done instead. I mean, because we've had this discussion with other historians and yourself. Once the first Allied Airborne Army has been created, it's going to get used, right? You're not going to create something and then just keep it wrapped in mothballs in England. So it's going to be used somewhere. The question is, could it have been used somewhere better? And I think it always comes down to the Scheldt Estuary and Antwerp and things like that. What's your? I mean,
I think the Scheldt Estuary or Walcheren and the Scheldt with an airborne drop with a massive push by 30 Corps that way, as long as there was enough troops to hold the line on the Dutch-Belgian border, would have been a great one, and that would have opened Antwerp a lot sooner.
Yeah, and there's that other thought. I remember talking to Weibo, the former curator at Hartenstein, that if Market Garden had worked and 30 Corps and all the other corps pushed on into the Ruhr, he said that would have been an even bigger disaster. I mean, that's the other thing, is would it how many army groups the Germans have in the Ruhr? So that's another question for another day. But I think it's what you've done is you presented some of these myths and you've looked at these controversies, and the fact is you, me, Paul, and all the other people, Nicholas Moss and Terry and Quaig in the sidebar, will be carrying on these conversations about Market Garden until they nail us in our coffins, and even then we'll probably keep on carrying on. It's it keeps us going. It's someone said it earlier on. We talk about the big defeats or the ones that don't go well in some ways more than we talk about the victories, because there's always that. Well, we could have done that. We should have done that, but it could have been. It's anyway. Well, Neil, it's been fantastic talking to you, folks. I'm back again on Monday talking about my Normandy tour next year. We've got shows about Leyte Gulf. We've got Breslau in 1945. Lots of things coming your way. So look forward to that. I'm getting more shows scheduled as we go. In the meantime, click like and subscribe, buy my guest books, and read their blogs, go on their tours. So Neil can be acquired as a guide via Ledger Tours. Ledger's chief historian Paul is in the sidebar there. So if you want to go and visit Arnhem with Neil, go to Ledger's website and find out about the next year's presentations. But anyway, we will leave things there. Cheers, everybody. Have a good weekend. Bye.